everybody. Welcome to my YouTube channel, The Lawyer's Law for Students. I am Shubhajit Banik and I'm a lawyer. Today we talk about general exceptions of the Indian Penal Code. That is chapter 4. There's an earlier video which I had posted and that was on the first part. First part means sections 76 to 86. Today we talk about sections 87 to sections 95. Okay. Let me give a brief recap. It'll be easy for the continuity. You checked the earlier video, but this is good enough, right? If you like it, do share and subscribe, right? And write to me in the comment section so that we can develop it for the betterment of all. Okay. 76 was bound by law. If you feel you're bound by law and you do something, it's not an offense. Example, the police officer says, shoot, and the subordinate officer shoots, right? Nothing wrong. Or by mistake of fact, you believe to be bound by law. I'll not elaborate. 77 was act of a judge. 78 was act done pursuant to an act of order of a judge. Or judgment. Example, the hangman hangs him, the culprit. Why? Because the judge said so. Correct? So it's not a crime. Okay. 79 was justified by law. Example, suppose you see Mr. X murdering Mr. Y and you feel that, so you nab Mr. X thinking to be justified by law, but actually X was acting in private defense. You do not know that, but you felt it was justified by law. No offense. 80, accident. If you do something lawful manner, lawful means, right? With all care and caution, but something happens, it's an accident. Example, if you recall, you're playing cricket, you're a batsman, suddenly the bat flies off and hits a player and he dies. Nothing, not an offense. 81, the choice. If without any criminal intent, you know that some harm is to be caused, but to prevent some larger harm, a greater harm to a person or property, you take a step, it's no harm. Example, you are the vessel of a captain, you're a captain of a vessel and there are two small boats approaching you. One has 30 persons and the other has 2 persons, and suddenly you have to make a choice. If you steer the vessel towards the boat with the 30 persons, they die. If you go towards the boat with 2 persons, they also die. But in an effort to save the 30, you move it towards the 2 persons and they die. Not an offense, right? Because it was not with criminal intent and to prevent larger harm. Similarly, if there's a neighborhood fire and you pull down houses to stop the fire from spreading, not an offense, right? 82 and 83, well, about children. 82, less than 7, no offense. Nothing is an offense. 7 to 12, it depends on the maturity level to understand, right? Then similarly, 83, 2, 3 gone. 84 was unsound mind. Regardless of age, if you're unsound mind, you cannot do an offense. Nothing is an offense. 85 and 86 related to intoxication. The common principle was, if the thing which got you intoxicated was not administered by you, all right, or it was given to you without your consent, and then something happened in the intoxication, it's not an offense if you do something, right, wrong. That's 85. 86 on the same principle, and it adds on, even if an act becomes an offense by reason of some intention or knowledge, specific knowledge, whatever, not the bookish language, then also if the intoxication is not voluntary and without your consent you have been intoxicated, then nothing is wrong. So in a substance, 76 to 86 gone. Today from 87 onwards, slowly. 87 to 92 talks about the concept of consent, C-O-N-S-E-N-T, in various ways. I'll explain with examples. 93, 94, 95 are relatively easier. 87. 87 talks about consent of a different angle. Remember, if something is legal and the one who gives the consent is 18 plus, it does not relate to a threat to life, death, and he consents to do it. He also consents to risk the harm associated with it. The illustration, common illustration is, if A and B both want to go for a game of fencing, you know fencing, it's like with swords and all, they have play with fences, right? It would not cause death. And if B is 18 plus and he consents to it, in the process of the game, if he gets hurt, then A is not guilty of any offense, right? Because if they consented to it, it was not bad, not illegal, and there was no life threat. And the one who consented was 18 plus. Clear? Okay. First angle of consent. 88, it takes on to a different level of consent. It says, remember 88 with hospital doctors and surgeons. It will be easier that way, right? 88, hospital, doctors, surgeons. The surgeon says, Mr. X, you're suffering from a disease. And he says correctly, honestly. And it is very painful or whatever is it, it requires an operation. Do you consent for it in an attempt to cure you? But there may be some harm. That's different. Do you give your consent? If you give your consent and he performs the operation and some harm is caused, doctor is not at fault. No offense. Correct. So 88 relate to hospitals, doctors. The consent you give to doctors to operate. Okay. Now 89. 89 talks about consent of a third angle. What is it? See, minors or persons of unsound mind and all, they cannot give consent. Right? You must be an adult. So if you consent, being a guardian or being someone who's in lawful charge of the minor, you consent for something and then it for the minor's benefit, of course, and then something goes wrong. See, there are exceptions, provisions, etc. I'm not on them. On the fundamental principle, which will help you in the examination hall. Suppose there's a child and the father consents for the operation. Same thing. Or there is a person who's of unsound mind and the lawful charge of someone and he also consents for the operation. Then something goes wrong. So this is not wrong. No one has committed any offense. Right? This is the concept of section 89. So we are clear with 89. Now we talk about 90. 90 talks about father-mother. I'm kidding. It's not father-mother. FNM. All right. If you do something, you give your consent out of fear or misconception of fact, father-mother related FNM. Right? Easy. If by reason of fear or by misconception of facts, right, you give consent, it is no consent in the eye of law. Firstly. Secondly, remember always. Secondly, if the consent is given by a minor below 12 years of age, no consent. By a person of unsound mind, insane, no consent. Right? Simple words I'm using. I'm not using complicated things. I'm not the bookish language though. Just understand. So again, 87 to 90, we recap. 87 is that fencing. Right? 18 plus, he gives a consent to do something which he might risk a harm. He risks it. He is hurt, but the other person cannot be booked of any offense. 87. 88 is consent given to doctors, surgeons, etc. All right? So if for the benefit from other person, you have to do something and he consents to doing it, risking the harm. That surgeon part. Right? Now 89 leads to a situation when minors or persons of unsound mind, for them the consent is given by the guardians or persons who have the lawful charge of them, right? And same like the surgeons, they operate with the consent of the guardian and something wrong happens. It happens. What can be done? It's for the benefit of the minor, right? You risk the harm. 90, father-mother, as I said. It means that if by fear, by reason of fear or misconception of facts, if someone consents, then that is no consent. Similarly, if the consent of a minor under 12 years or persons of unsound mind, there are no consents in the eye of law. 90 is gone. Now 91 talks of a different situation altogether. What does 91 say? 91 says, see, that consent part would not help you if some act is an offense independently by itself. That I consented for it, it happened, so there's no offense, no, nothing doing. Example, causing miscarriage. Now it might be required for saving the life of that lady who's pregnant. All right, then termination of pregnancy might be required, but otherwise that causing miscarriage itself is an offense and the consent of that lady would not help you, so the doctor is not saved. Clear? So some acts which are independently offenses independent of themselves, are not within the ambit of 87, 88 or 89. Clear? That's 91. All right, now 92. 92 says, what if you do something for someone's good without their consent and something wrong happens? Example, you see that a tiger is carrying Mr. Jaw. He has with his jaws, he has picked up Mr. X and is walking towards the forest. And suddenly you have a gun and to save Mr. X, you shoot. You know that there's a likelihood that it might hit Mr. X and he may die. But still, you run the risk without the consent of X to save him. Right? And it hits Mr. X and X dies. Are you at fault? No, you aren't. That's 91. 92, right? Suppose a child is there in an accident. The child meets with an accident and is bleeding profusely. You as a doctor have to operate the child, but there's no point of time to consult or the guardian or take the consent from the guardian concerned. What do? On your own hand, you do it to save the life of the child. Unfortunately, the child dies. Are you guilty? No, you're not guilty. That's the beauty of 92. Clear? Okay. 93, 94, 95 is not about consent. It's slightly different thing. 93 says, communication done in good faith will relate to doctors is no consent, is not an offense. Example, the doctor tells Mr. X, Mr. X, you have a cancer, I'm sorry to hear, and I'm sorry to say, and you will die in a few days. And Mr. X dies in a state of shock. The doctor is not at fault. That is 93. Clear? Okay. 94. If something is not murder or not an offense against the state, which you can be punished with death, then if you are under the threat of immediate instant death and you commit an offense, there is no offense on your part. See, a group of dacoits come and they put you to threat of instant death, and in that fear, you join them. You are not guilty. You're saved by 93. 94. Clear? Okay. But if the dacoits do not threaten you with instant death, but to beat you up badly, but that's not death. You don't fear of instant death, and you still join them. Then your fear is something of something lesser than death. Then you're guilty. The section would not protect you. Clear? Okay. And 95 is the easiest of all. If some harm is caused which is so negligible that people will not complain about it, then it is no offense. All right? Simple things. So we have done from 76 to 95. Mostly this video was about 86 to 87 to 95. Clear? Once again, 87, 88, 89, 90, 91, 92, they talk about consents of different forms. 87 talks about consent, about that fencing game, you remember. I would not tell. 88 talks about surgeons operating with consent. Okay, you remember. 89 talks about minors and unsound minds, the consent being given by the guardians or all. You remember. 90 talks about father, mother. If by mistake of, for reason of, I forgot the word, fear or misconception of fact, the consent is given, no consent. Consent of a minor children below 12 years, no consent. And a person of unsound mind, no consent. 91, that miscarriage thing. If something is an offense independent of itself, independently it's an offense, then 87, 88, 89, that consent would not help you. Miscarriage example, remember. Then 92 says, without consent, if you do something for someone's good, okay, but something wrong happens, no offense. That tiger is carrying Mr. X away, right? And you shoot to save Mr. X, but you hit Mr. X. You know it might cause death, but you still run the risk without consent of X. X dies, no offense, right? 93, communication in good faith, right? The doctor says, Mr. X, you will die in a few days. X goes in a state of shock, he dies, right? No offense. Then 94 talks about when there's a threat given to you of instant death and nothing short of it, right? The dacoit example. And you do something out of that threat of instant death, no offense. But something short of that, if you are threatened with something of lesser than death, then of course, if they want to beat you up and you're scared of that beating, you do some crime, no, you're not protected. And lastly, 95, if some harm is caused which is so negligible by doing an act, which usually people will not complain of, then that is not an offense, right? So we have done 76 to 95. And the last limb, the video to follow is private defense, that is 96 to 106. We wrap up chapter 4 of the Indian Penal Code by the next video. Listen, if you like the way of explanations and the explanations help you to recall and understand, do comment, do share and subscribe. By sharing, we'll reach out more people, and the more people we reach out, we'll have a stronger group, right? It feels nice when everyone joins in. Stay happy, stay indoors. Thank you.